"You're seriously wearing that to the strategy meeting?" The question came out of Helena's mouth like a dagger dipped in acid. "No, good morning." "No, how was your weekend?" Just a public slap across the face, in front of 5 coworkers and the glass walls of the executive floor. My breath caught in my throat as I turned toward her, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. I looked down at my outfit. Tailored charcoal blazer, silk top, black heels. Professional. Completely normal. "What's wrong with it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Helena didn't answer. She gave me a once-over, then shook her head like I was a disappointing meal she hadn't ordered. Then she just walked away. "My name is Camille Rossner, but everyone at Redstone Metrics just calls me Cam. I'm 32, and for the past 6 years I've worked my way up from junior analyst to lead project manager. I've launched initiatives that earned our company over $9 million in new contracts. I've mentored 24 associates who now lead their own teams. I've been here longer than 3 of the C-suite executives. But none of that mattered the day Helena Kincaid was hired as our new VP of strategy. From day one, she treated me like I was clutter in her newly renovated corner office. At first, I told myself it was just the adjustment phase. New leadership always comes with ego. But Helena didn't just ignore me, she studied me, watched me, interrupted me in meetings, took credit for suggestions I made the week before. She even requested access to my project documentation for alignment, and then mysteriously started using my phrasing in her own proposals. It was subtle, calculated, the kind of undermining you can't complain about without sounding petty. And trust me, Helena knew exactly how to keep it in that gray area. But last Thursday, that's when she made her move. It was 6:58 a.m. when I walked into the conference room that morning. Helena had sent me a terse email the night before with the subject line, "Urgent, be early, confidential." No details, no context, just an order. So I showed up. Inside the conference room sat the entire executive team. PO Rick Carmichael, FIFO Teresa King, VP of Sales. My stomach sank. Helena stood at the head of the table, laser pointer in hand, manicured fingers tapping against the glass surface. Her expression didn't shift when she saw me enter, just a flicker of something that looked like satisfaction. "Ah, Camille. Join us," she said. "We were just reviewing your handling of the Lockridge account." My heart skipped. The Lockridge account was my baby. A 6-month campaign that had doubled their user acquisition and earned us a glowing review in TechWest Weekly. As far as I knew, everything was running smoothly. Until Helena turned toward the screen. Displayed in giant font behind her was an email, supposedly sent by me. Subject line, "Lockridge Timeline Revision, Final Draft." Except, it wasn't my final draft. She'd pulled an outdated version. One that didn't include her last-minute changes from 2 weeks ago. The version I'd replaced. I opened my mouth to speak, but she held up a hand. "Camille, can you explain why the client received this version instead of the one we agreed upon?" My throat went dry. "I sent the correct version," I said slowly, scanning the screen. This isn't what I submitted." "Really?" she said, tilting her head. "Because this is what was sent. And Lockridge is not happy." Her tone was icy but calm. Performed. She knew exactly what she was doing. Rick Carmichael leaned forward. "This was a big deal, Camille," he said, his voice measured. "They're reconsidering the Q4 rollout based on this confusion." My cheeks flushed. I could feel every pair of eyes in the room burning into me. "I have the email receipts," I said. "I'll pull them up right now." Helena cut me off. "Let's not waste time," she said, clicking to the next slide. "What's more important is understanding where this lack of communication came from." Lack of communication? She'd deliberately excluded me from 3 client calls over the past month, citing executive-level discussions. She'd taken meetings I scheduled and rescheduled them under her calendar invites, cutting me out entirely. And now she was framing me as the problem? I clenched my fists under the table, trying to stay composed. "Helena," I said, "I'm happy to go through the document trail." "I'm sure you are," she replied, her voice silken venom. "But at this level, Camille, results matter more than excuses." I felt like I'd been slapped. The meeting went on without me. I sat there silenced, diminished, branded as the weak link in front of every executive whose respect I'd spent years earning. When it was finally over, Helena gave me a polite smile as I gathered my things. "Thanks for coming in early," she said. "Hope this was a learning opportunity." She turned and walked out, heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. I stood there alone, my hands trembling slightly as I packed my laptop. Not because I was scared, but as I was done. If Helena wanted a power play, she just activated the wrong opponent. I didn't go back to my desk after the meeting. I walked straight to the building's rooftop terrace, the only place in the office that didn't feel like it was watching me. It was barely 9 a.m. and downtown Denver was already pulsing with energy. Cyclists, coffee runners, executives on phone calls pacing the sidewalks. Meanwhile, I stood 10 stories up, staring at the skyline, fighting the urge to scream. How did this happen? I wasn't a screw-up. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't sloppy. And I definitely wasn't the kind of person who let someone humiliate her without a fight. But that's exactly what had just happened. In front of the executive team. In front of the CEO. In front of my future. And it wasn't just an ambush. It was a setup. I knew I had sent the correct file. I knew Helena had made those revisions herself and asked me to implement them 2 weeks ago. But now she was rewriting the narrative. Painting me as careless. Questionable. Replaceable. And worse. No one in that room had stood up for me. Not Teresa, the CFO I'd worked side by side with on 3 funding proposals. Not Rick, who once told me I had executive material written all over me. Because that's what Helena was doing, wasn't it? Positioning herself to be the only voice they trusted. By silencing mine. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. My fingers moved fast, scanning the sent folder, screenshots flying into my camera roll. There it was. The time-stamped draft of the Lockridge presentation. Correct version. Sent to the client's internal team. CC'd to Helena. I had proof. But as I stared at the emails, a sick realization settled in my stomach. None of this had been an accident. Helena hadn't just picked the wrong file. She'd used the wrong file. She wanted that version sent. She wanted me to look incompetent. And she wanted everyone in that boardroom to think I was the problem. Why? Because 2 months ago, during a leadership retreat in Aspen, Rick had mentioned, half joking, half serious, that I was a natural choice for Director of Product Operations, a new role they were quietly building. I thought nothing of it at the time. I even laughed. But Helena had been sitting right next to him when he said it. She'd heard. And she hadn't laughed. I spent the rest of the day keeping my head down. I sat through meetings like a ghost, took notes like an intern, and avoided eye contact with anyone who might offer me a sympathetic glance. I couldn't stand the pity. I didn't need pity. I needed a plan. That night I didn't go home. I stopped by my favorite bar in Lodo. A small jazz lounge with velvet booths, low lighting, and no chance of running into coworkers. I ordered a bourbon neat and sat in a corner booth with my laptop. And I got to work. First, I documented everything. Every email between me and Helena regarding the Lockridge revisions. Internal chat messages where she gave vague instructions but later claimed I had ignored protocol. Calendar invites she had mysteriously removed me from. Screenshots of project dashboards showing my version control. Second, I created a timeline. A clean visual roadmap of how she'd begun subtly rewriting my narrative. I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Her name was Jillian Trent. Former senior product manager at Redstone. Brilliant. Confident. Unshakable. And Helena had pushed her out within 3 weeks of arriving. At the time I hadn't known the full story. Jillian had left quietly, sending a vague goodbye email about new opportunities. But when I called her that night, she answered on the second ring. "Cam, this is unexpected. I think Helena's trying to do to me what she did to you," I said bluntly. There was silence on the other end. Then a quiet laugh. "You mean undermine your credibility until you either quit or get pushed out while she absorbs your power and your position?" "Exactly that." "Well," Jillian said, "welcome to the club." We spoke for 2 hours. Jillian told me how Helena had used the same tactics. Excluding her from meetings she used to lead. Reassigning her clients without explanation. Submitting reports with errors she had supposedly made, and then fixing them in front of leadership to look like a hero. "She's smart," Jillian said. "She never leaves a trail. But she underestimates people who do." We agreed to meet that weekend. Jillian had been documenting her own experience since the day Helena joined. And now, with my story added to the mix, we had a pattern. A dangerous one. And possibly enough for HR to finally act. I didn't sleep that night. But for the first time in days, my exhaustion felt like fuel. Let Helena enjoy her little show. She had no idea the curtain was about to fall. And this time I'd be the one holding the spotlight. Monday morning started like every other. Coffee. Elevator. Polite nods to coworkers pretending not to know what had happened in that conference room. But something was different. Me. I wasn't walking into that office the same person Helena humiliated last week. I wasn't shaken. I wasn't scared. I was prepared. And I wasn't alone. Over the weekend, Jillian and I had built a case, not just against Helena's treatment of me, but a documented pattern of manipulation, gaslighting, and calculated professional sabotage. We compared timelines, pulled internal communications, found a total of 3 former female leads at Redstone who had either resigned under pressure or had been mysteriously phased out within 6 months of Helena's arrival. The common thread. Each had been positioned for advancement before Helena inserted herself into their orbit. Each had glowing reviews, until Helena started managing them. And each had left behind a trail of digital fingerprints that now told a much bigger story. Jillian had already forwarded me a folder full of archived Slack conversations, performance reviews, and private emails. I spent Sunday night building a presentation of my own. Not for a client. Not for a product launch. But for HR. That morning, I waited until Helena stepped out for her usual 10-15 coffee strategy break. She always left her office door slightly ajar, like a symbol of open leadership. It was laughable. I walked into HR 10 minutes later, thumb drive in hand, and requested a private meeting with Lana Hastings, our Director of People and Culture. She looked up, surprised. "Everything all right, Camille?" I shut the door behind me. "No. But I'm about to fix that." We sat down in the small conference room just off her office, the one with the frosted glass walls and soundproof seal. It felt appropriate. Like a courtroom. I slid the thumb drive across the table. "Everything you need is on there," I said calmly. "Correspondence, timelines, digital trails. From both me and 2 former senior employees." Lana arched a brow. "This is about Helena, isn't it?" I nodded. "She tried to set me up last Thursday. Publicly. It was deliberate and I have the email proof. But this isn't just about me. She's been doing this for months. Possibly longer." Lana plugged in the drive and opened the folder titled Helena Kincaid, Pattern of Misconduct. I watched her expression shift as she scrolled through my annotated timeline of events. Helena's conflicting instructions and email contradictions. Side-by-side comparisons of manipulated communications. Screenshots of Slack threads where she undermined my work to other team leads. Meeting recordings where she forgot to include credit. And finally, the resignation letters from Jillian and another colleague, both describing a toxic, hostile dynamic they'd been too afraid to formally report at the time. "This is extensive," Lana said, eyes wide. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" "Because I thought I could fix it by working harder. Because I didn't want to be labeled dramatic. Because she's smart and subtle and knows how to cover her tracks." "And now?" Lana asked. "Now I have receipts. And allies." Lana didn't say much after that. She simply closed the folder, removed the thumb drive, and told me to keep everything backed up. "I'll be in touch," she said carefully. "I believe you. And this won't be ignored." I nodded and stood. But before I reached the door, she said something that stopped me cold. "You're not the first person to come in here about her," she said. "But you might be the one who finally brought enough proof." I walked out of HR lighter than I'd felt in months. But Helena. She wasn't going to go down easy. Sure enough, when I returned to my desk, she was already waiting. Perched on the edge of my chair like she owned it. Like she owned me. "Taking long lunches now?" she asked, tone sickly sweet. "I had a meeting," I replied, voice even. "Anything I should know about?" I looked her square in the eye. "Not yet." Her smile faltered. "Just slightly. But enough." She stood slowly, adjusted the cuff of her blazer, and leaned in a little too close. "You know, Cam," she whispered, "there's a difference between ambition and arrogance. Be careful you're not confusing the two." I tilted my head. "And there's a difference between leadership and sabotage. But don't worry, I know the difference." She blinked. Just once. But in that blink I saw it. The tiniest crack in her carefully curated armor. She turned and walked away without another word. And for the first time since she stepped into my world, I knew she was scared. Helena didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. Not a glare. Not a passive-aggressive comment in a meeting. Nothing. Which, if you knew Helena, was more suspicious than a direct confrontation. She wasn't the silent type. She preferred control. Proximity. Pressure. The quiet wasn't peace. It was strategy. But what she didn't know was that the game had already changed. That night I received an email from HR. Subject line: follow-up request, formal review pending. Short. Professional. Loaded. Lana wanted a follow-up meeting the next morning, and this time she'd invited Rick Carmichael, the CEO, to sit in. I stared at the email for a few long seconds before leaning back in my chair, heart thudding. This wasn't a "we'll look into it" courtesy call. This was action. The next morning I arrived at work early. Not because I had to, because I wanted Helena to see me. To see that I wasn't hiding. To see that whatever power she thought she had over me was dissolving like sugar in hot coffee. At 9 a.m. I walked into Lana's office and took my seat. Rick was already there, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. He offered a polite smile, the kind people give you when they're about to ask very hard questions. Lana spoke first. "Camille, thank you again for coming forward. We've reviewed the documentation, spoken to 2 former employees, and performed a preliminary audit of internal communications from the last 6 months." I nodded. "And?" Rick folded his hands on the table. "Helena's behavior raises significant concerns. There's a pattern of exclusion, misrepresentation, and what appears to be intentional obstruction of employee advancement." I felt my breath catch, but I didn't let it show. Lana continued. "We'll be placing her on temporary administrative leave starting this afternoon while we conduct a full investigation. We'll also be conducting confidential interviews with your department." I blinked. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't sure how it would feel to finally be heard. Felt steadying. Not vindictive. Just solid. Like the ground beneath me was real again. Helena didn't see it coming. At 2:17 p.m., I watched from my desk as 2 members of the People and Culture team stepped into her office, folders in hand. She was smiling, probably mid-story about her weekend in Aspen, when she saw the HR badges. The smile fell. Not dramatically. Just gone. She stood slowly, eyes darting toward me once. Just once. I didn't look away. She gathered her things carefully. No drama. No tantrum. Just silence. Then she walked out of the office she tried to make her kingdom, and left without a word. The news spread fast. By 4 o'clock it was office gospel. Helena's been suspended. Something about HR and ethics violations. Camille's involved. Did you hear? I ignored the whispers. They weren't my concern. They never were. That evening, as the office emptied out, I sat alone in the break room sipping chamomile tea, my little ritual when I needed to think without noise. And that's when Teresa King Arcivo walked in. She wasn't usually one for small talk. A numbers woman. Cool, clipped, always moving. But tonight she paused at the doorway. "You know," she said, "Helena once told me you didn't have the instinct for leadership." I looked up, waiting. She smiled just barely. Glad to see she was wrong. And then she walked out. That night as I lay in bed, I thought about how close I'd come to believing Helena's version of me. How easily self-doubt can grow when someone else keeps watering it. But I wasn't fragile. I wasn't replaceable. And I sure as hell wasn't done. Helena had played the long game. But I had just rewritten the ending. By Wednesday, Helena's name was radioactive. She wasn't on leave. She wasn't taking time. She was the center of a full-blown HR investigation with legal oversight. And suddenly, everyone who had tiptoed around her was remembering how to use their voices. People who had stayed silent during her reign of manipulation now whispered stories over microwaved lunches and coffee machine queues. Stories about undermined projects, missed promotions, clients reassigned last minute, performance reviews lost in the system. It was like someone had lifted the lid off a pressure cooker that had been building steam for months. But I didn't join the gossip. I didn't need to. Because while Helena's name was crumbling under its own weight, mine was rising through the cracks she'd tried to bury me in. Thursday morning I was called back to Rick's office. Not HR. Not a disciplinary room. The corner office. The one Helena used to. I like it belonged to her by divine right. Camille, he said, gesturing for me to sit. I wanted to speak to you directly. I nodded. Of course. He leaned forward, fingers steepled, serious. What you brought to us, your documentation, your restraint, your professionalism, it wasn't just impressive. It was brave. I said nothing. Let him keep going. We pride ourselves on being a company that recognizes leadership. Sometimes we miss the signs when the wrong people speak louder than the right ones. But we're correcting that now. He paused just long enough to make it feel real. I want you to take over Helena's position. Interim Vice President of Strategy. Effective immediately. I blinked. Not because I didn't expect movement, but because I didn't expect it this soon. This fast. This direct. You've been doing the work for years anyway, he added. Might as well give you the title. By the end of the day, an announcement went out across the company. Formal. Clear. Clean. We are proud to announce that Camille Rossner has been appointed Interim VP of Strategy, effective immediately. Her leadership, innovation, and integrity have been instrumental to Redstone's growth. My inbox exploded. Congratulations. Long overdue messages. Even a few apologies. One from Teresa. Another, surprisingly, from a junior associate. Helena had publicly dressed down in front of a client last month. But none of them compared to the short 2-word email I received at 8:17 p.m. Subject, no surprise. Body, you earned this. Jillian. I didn't celebrate that night. Not with drinks. Not with takeout. Not even with a victory lap in Helena's old office. Instead, I went home, kicked off my shoes, lit a candle, and sat in silence for a long time. Because what no one tells you is that even when you win, you still carry the bruises. Even when the villain is gone, you still remember the sting of their voice, the doubt they planted. And even when you get the title, you still wonder if you'll be enough. But as I sat there, feet curled beneath me, I thought about something Jillian had said when we first spoke. Don't let her make you smaller than you are. I hadn't. And I wouldn't. Not ever again. 2 weeks after Helena was removed, I moved into her office. Same walls. Same view. Same cold marble desk. But nothing about it felt like her anymore. I replaced the sterile white orchid with a jade plant. Removed the ego books, How to Command a Room, Crush or Be Crushed, and stacked my own instead. Strategy, Leadership, Communication. Books that weren't about power, but about people. Because I wasn't here to dominate. I was here to build. Rebuild really what Helena had fractured. The first thing I did was call in every team lead Helena had alienated. Not for reprimand. Not for reminders. For a question. What do you need to thrive here again? Some people blinked like they didn't understand the language. Others answered before I even finished the sentence. Ideas poured in. Fixes. Frustrations. Innovations that had been buried beneath fear and red tape. By the end of the week, I had a new org structure drafted. And by the end of the month, morale had shifted so tangibly you could feel it when you stepped onto our floor. People laughed again. Stayed late by choice. Sent emails that didn't have to be combed for subtext. I wasn't the hero of some office legend. I was just the one who refused to leave quietly. The official news came quietly. Helena's departure was framed as a mutual decision, corporate PR at its finest. But the truth had already outlived the spin. People knew. And more importantly, people remembered who spoke up, and who didn't. One afternoon, I found myself alone in the conference room. That room. The one where she tried to break me. Same chairs. Same glass walls. Same projector screen. But this time I stood at the head of the table. Not defending myself. Not shrinking. Not blinking back tears. I was preparing a quarterly strategy session, and every department lead had already confirmed attendance. Because now, when I sent calendar invites, people didn't second-guess their place in the room. They just showed up. Engaged. Eager. I glanced at the monitor and caught my own reflection in the dark screen. Sharp blazer. Eyes steady. A little older than when this started. But stronger too. Wiser in all the ways that matter. I didn't look like a woman recovering from workplace trauma. I looked like a woman who had learned how to own her space. Sometimes people still ask me why I didn't just leave. Why I stayed after everything Helena did. And the answer is simple. Because I earned this place. I built it. Not for her. Not even for the title. But for the version of me that sat on that rooftop months ago. Furious, humiliated, and dangerously close to believing I wasn't enough. I stayed for her. So she'd never think that again.